Spring fishing season is just around the corner, and Border Sporting Goods is your fishing headquarters for rods and reels from G. Loomis, St. Croix, Fenwick, Lewes, Daiwa, Shimano, and Abu Garcia. No matter what species of fish you are targeting, Borders has the perfect setup to make your next trip on the water a success. Borders has baits in every style and size, with a wide selection of tackle from Berkeley, Strike King, Zoom, Z-Man, Bandit, and many more. Before hitting the water for your next fishing trip, stop by and stock up at Border Sporting Goods, US 60 West in Ashland. To Casting with the Coaches, presented by Border Sporting Goods. I'm James Collier. He's Evan Ferguson. Happy to have everyone here with us as we start the 2024 season. Coach, did you have a Happy New Year?
I did. I'm ready to get fishing, though.
Well, I cheated a little bit. I did get out on New Year's Eve, and it was almost a disaster trip. So my buddy and I, we'd planned on, when I went out a couple of days prior to that, I found a couple of trees, and they were stock loaded full of crappie. And we were going fishing. So I got everything ready to roll, pulled up at the bait shop there in Grayson, and I walk in and the guy said, "You're not going to be very happy. We don't have any bait." So we had nothing. So we both got to the dock. Everything was ready to go. And I said, well, let's just at least go try fishing. So we got some stuff out, headed up the lake, and just went fishing and enjoyed the day. It was a beautiful day. It got up to almost 50 degrees, and we actually caught, we had 5 bass that we caught. I missed 2 other ones. Everything was on jerkbaits. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, sounds like a good time getting to go out and catch fish this time of year. There've been people catching them, so if you haven't had a chance to get out, definitely try to. I'm dying to myself. I hopefully will, because I know there's no ducks flying right now. That's for sure. There's no ducks around here until we get some more weather. They're done. So we'll hopefully get a storm to fix me on that.
Well, before we get going here, again, our social media, follow us along here on YouTube at Casting with the Coaches. We've picked up some new subscribers, and again, we're still trying to do that. In February, we're going to start doing our giveaways. So we've got some stuff that we're working on with different sponsors and different product vendors that we've got. So we'll start doing stuff with that. You can follow us on social media. He's at Coach Eferg12. I'm at Collier SZ Live. And the most important one there, the email. We want to see your fish catches. So CWTC, Casting with the Coaches, fishing at gmail.com. We've got a couple that we're going to throw into the show tonight that some of our friends had sent over to me. So we'll have those. But again, share that with your friends, post that out there, and most importantly, hey, hit that subscribe button because we want you to be alerted each time that we're up. And, I think that the show is starting to get a bit of a foundation to it, Coach, and it's something that I think we found a little bit of a niche here that maybe some people are liking. And more importantly, if you see something out there that you want to see or want to talk about, let us know. We're always welcome to suggestions.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely want to do something that, we want viewers to make it kind of more worthwhile, but it gives us an excuse to talk fishing at least once a week anyway. And I think it's going to continue to be at least a hobby of ours. And, if it continues to grow, and I think giveaways will definitely help on growing because who doesn't love free stuff? So you get a chance to tune in and get something for free. I think that's pretty much a win-win.
Yeah, that's the most important thing there is those giveaways. Again, we'll get those going there in February, so it gives us a little bit more time to get some of the subscribers in there. But again, the first giveaways we're going to go with, you have to be a subscriber to the channel. So if you've not done so, hit that subscribe button. Give us that thumbs up if you like what you see. Hit that bell. It'll alert you each time that we put something out. The nice part about the show is, Coach, right now it's cold outside, and a lot of time this is a good time to start breaking stuff down. As the weather breaks, we're going to get back out on the water. We'll get plenty of fish catches and some techniques directly on the water. But tonight, I think the big thing we're going to take and focus on is something that works really well this time of year. Cold water, we're going to look at jerk baits.
Yeah. Speaking of your fishing trip, that's kind of what you've been telling me. It's kind of been the bait of choice, and the success has been the jerk bait. It's definitely a famous wintertime staple for a lot of people. We've been talking about a lot of wintertime stuff, and look, we're not really wintertime experts, but you know what? It's the time of year we get to fish, and we're going to continue to talk about it until we get into the warm time of the year. So, you go ahead and start us off with going over a little bit of success you had this weekend there at Grayson.
Well, we got out on the water and just basically tried to find some rock, found some bait, and just went working. And I mixed up some different types of baits, and my partner actually caught the first two fish. He had a smaller jerk bait that he dug out of my box, and so I picked my jerk bait up and started with it. And then we started kind of putting a little bit of a pattern together. There was rock wood together near points, and that's when we started finding our better bites. And the cadence, we're going to talk about that as well. That did make a difference this weekend. And I've seen sometimes when the cadence makes no difference whatsoever, and I've seen sometimes to where the cadence is all about whether you're getting bit or not. So that's something we're going to talk about. The sizes, the colors of jerk baits, the type of equipment that you're using to throw your jerk bait on. And I know you and I were talking before we went live here. It's about being able to cast that jerk bait, so the weight of the jerk bait has something to do with it as well, especially when you're working on those windy days, a lot of times when you're throwing the jerk bait.
Yeah. There's a lot of nuances to it. There's different types of jerk baits, more so than just the brands. You have your floating, suspending. Right now, everybody's kind of focused on the suspending, and we are too. But there's still a time and place for the old school floating if we want to get to that too. But there's a lot of stuff we can dive into, and it's definitely a bait that can get you right in a hurry if you get around the right type of fish.
And the most important thing is that we're going to talk about, like you said, several different manufacturers of baits, different styles of baits. It's all about having the bait in your hand that you have confidence with, whether it's the Stunna, the Smithwick Rogue, a Rapala, any of those models that's out there. Coach, you've got one that you're hooked into, the Megabass. And we've looked at those compared to some of the other baits. You see some similarities, but there's some very subtle differences that you notice as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll pull up these two right here. I just hook my Stunna, just hooked the computer. So I guess it's catching everything. But no, right here we have this is the Stunna, the Berkeley Stunna, a little bit deeper. Was it the plus one, or is it what's it actually called? I forgot. Yeah, 112 plus one is the Stunna, and this is the old school Megavast Vision 110 plus one. And as you can see, they are really similar baits. Maybe a little bit more of a curve right here. And I mean, they're really similar. And a lot of people, this was kind of modeled and copied. He's maybe not admit to it now, but Hank Cherry was one of the big designers in this, won the Guntersville Classic and won the other one there in Texas, and almost won his first classic there on Grand Lake of the Cherokees out there in Oklahoma. And it was on a Megabass. And Berkeley sponsored them, and Livingston did first too. They said, let's make a jerk bait. And this is what he designed. So I think, a guy who kind of took this and made it his own way is definitely something special. And you probably can't tell, but we were looking at it, and you can actually see these two like bearings inside that slide, that weight transfer system. And there's only one. You can kind of see this translucent one. There's a smaller, just one in the Stunna. And you were bragging about how you like the Stunna, and I haven't really dove into using it much yet, but I do like using my Megabass. And I said the first impression I had with using it was it casts so much better for me. I just can cast it further, and I think you're especially trying to make lengthy casts, get those because these are clear water baits most of the time, and getting it far away from you is going to help you get more bites. And that's why I was a big fan of this, especially in the windy days. But obviously, there's a time for this one too. It's just something that I need to gain some confidence in. But we can analyze this all day. I keep looking at them, but. There's all kinds of different things you can do with them, and you'll see. I think some of these baits here I've got. You can see. I'll go over this later, but there's different ways you can with suspend strips that you can kind of manipulate how they are buoyant on your own. And I think if you try to just throw a jerk bait out of the box and just they work, but there's obviously going to be different times where they sink, different times where they float, just based on water temperature. And while that's crazy to think it happens, it definitely does happen. So you want to have some suspend strips ready to rock and roll, that we can manipulate how the bait works for you best on the water that day.
Yeah, you talk about the stunner. So there's the famous the Stone Cold. This is the 112 plus one as well, and it's a bait that it catches fish. I'm a big believer. I like the three treble hooks when I throw the jerk baits. I do have some that are the two, but I like the three. I just think you get a better hookup rate from those and stuff. But this bait, kind of a translucent side with the purple top. You got the black head there, and this is just a bait that I go to whenever I feel like that I need to be able to find a bite, and it has a lot of confidence. Now, saying that as well, this one is one that is a custom that I did. Has a little bit thicker body, and I made it more of a white than a translucent, but that purple top there, it would help if I put it on the camera there. That purple top, it's something that I really have a lot of confidence with. I've caught a lot of fish with that color up north, and as well back here at home too. This one's a little bit heavier of a bait. I think this was kind of what you were talking about. Maybe that mega bass is a little bit heavier. This one has a heavier ball bearing in it. I can hear it as it moves around. But that transfer system as that ball moves around, I think that's something that's very key in a lot of the jerk baits that you see today.
Yeah, I mean, we go back, compare the mega bass. This was the old. This is a goofy looking one, but Lucky Strike, not Lucky Crap, but Lucky Strike, and Rick Clunn actually had the exact mold, as you can see here, as the mega bass for a while. And I don't care what anybody says, it's different. You can catch several on it, but the one thing I'll vouch for, I'm not trying to bash these, but I actually had the body of the hook eyes start to tear out on me. So they catch fish, obviously, but I don't like seeing plastic that can tear. Actually, this is the reason, that scenario exactly is why I quit throwing the Lucky Strike. You obviously can still catch fish on it. I'm sure it has a little bit, it sounds pretty much the same, but that's something just to consider. I know people that break these too, so they all have their faults, but there's so many differences here. And we're going to be forever on diving into this stuff.
Well, here's another one I want to roll out here, and this was old trusty for me, the good old Smithwick Rogue. And there is something that's very unique about the Smithwicks, the way that they set these up. And I'll point it out right here. If you notice that red eye signifies this is a suspending jerkbait. And the yellow eye gives you more of a floating difference. Fished a tournament down on Barron. It's been several years ago, but my buddy and I, we were both throwing the Smithwick Rogues. He had the yellow eye, I had the red eye. I was catching more fish. And that suspending action makes just a little bit difference. And sometimes you get around active fish, it's not going to matter. They're going to eat it up. But when you get around those fish that are a little finicky and they want that bait just a little bit more in that water column, and plus it's going to hang right there where you want it in that strike zone, you want that suspending action. This right here is a very big color there, that clown color with that big red nose on the top of it.
Yeah, you can see my mess of Smithwicks here. I'm
I think if I noticed there, I think you've got one of the floating ones because it looked like I saw a yellow eye on that one.
It does. I'll be honest though, and I'm not trying to take away from your point, but it actually does say suspending Rogue on these. They were the suspending Pro Rogue. I don't know if it was, but they are yellow-eyed, so I don't know if it was just a special model or whatever. But these all do say suspend, and they do suspend. I was trying to show because I really manipulated. This is the Elite 8 Rogue, and I'm trying to get it. But I mean, speaking of suspend strips, you can kind of see just that metal underneath. I weighted it on the front, have one at the mouth of the, the bill there. I really weighted that one up, and you can see by how it's beat up that it may still, I mean, I look like I'm a jerkbait wizard, and I'm definitely not. But at the same time, there's different ways to throw them and catch fish on them. If you don't mind, I'm gonna go back to. I brought this up a second ago, and while we're still talking about different things with the jerkbaits and different types of them, I actually was debating when you brought up doing jerkbaits if I wanted to share this. So I'm not trying to again act super like an expert, But Hank Cherry, I think, was one of the best jerkbait guys out there recently. I mean, he's won classics on it, and grew up on Norman down there in North Carolina, where a lot of these guys are throwing jerkbaits all the time. And you get around the Ozarks, and jerkbaits are a big deal too. Um, and you want to imagine how that fish is going to. You talked about how that. I'm sorry, I get ADD and I get sidetracked so fast because I had so many points I wanted to bring up about your Smithwick, and I just got back on the mega bass. So sorry, we'll go back to Smithwick. I apologize, but how these things sink, and I actually took and wrapped my back hook, and because if you notice a shad dying this time of year, they usually, if you watch them, they try to flutter, and they kind of get stuck going back up. And if you can keep these weights here synced in the back with this little bit of extra weight here, and to where you jerk it, and then it'll just sit there. It's like it just can't get going. And you can really leave this bait by weighting your back hook in one spot. And I've really enjoyed trying to, and you can watch it. And I'll play with it a little bit now that I got the live scope. I've never jerk baited in jerkbait time on a scope yet, so I'm excited to do it this winter. This early spring coming up. But I just know from old school doing it, just casting out and throwing it, I've gained a lot of confidence by putting that weight on your back hook. And you can see it's even bent out where they'll end up just nipping and hanging onto that back part of it as they come up here and just try to suck it down. Just something to consider with your jerkbait fishing, different ways. And you may believe in wanting to do it this way, you should weight this hook, but I found this back hook weighting it has been a game changer for me, and just use a little bit of tape for that. So just something I wanted to share. Sorry, go ahead.
And the suspend strips, I remember when those came out and they really hit the market. It seems like it was 20 years ago. And it was something that was really big, and I think there were some major tournaments that started talking about their success with the suspend strips. And I think some of the guys kind of have gone away from it, but your hard-nosed, old-school jerkbait guys, guarantee you they've got those suspend strips around because they want to make that little bit of extra action that maybe they can't get from that bait that comes out of the box.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not gonna lie, I love it on jerkbaits. Half of these have some strips on them. Think about it. I even use them on spinnerbaits sometimes. If I just need it to sink just a little bit more weight, just make it run a little bit truer. We hand make a lot of spinner baits, and just if I want to, I can really kind of alter how that bait's going to run and be kind of more true in the water. And it kind of makes its own hook keeper in a way too. It's just something interesting that we've found out that can be effective. But it's the strips or something. If you're going to be a serious jerkbait guy, you got to get, and they're like $4 for a pack of that's going to last you for a couple of years. So, I mean, if you go through them all in a year, you've probably done too much. You've been stripping too much on there with the suspend strips.
Too much stripping and jerking.
Okay. Anyway, we're going to move on. I'm going to go back to the rogue before we make this awkward. So one thing with the, I think I wanted to bring up about your rogue, like this is a darting. The mega bass, your stunner, I've noticed they dart, and they're kind of a pointing style. I call it in my head pointing. The rogue has that traditional rogue roll. I don't know if you can analyze that too. The rogue roll is famous, and there's something to be said, and that especially around treetops, there's something really unique still about that old school Smithwick roll that the rogues can do that other jerkbaits can't. So, and they're not as expensive as those $25 mega basses, and you got to have the different types of jerkbait, I think, in your box. And the rogue roll is something unique to kind of counter what everybody seems to like with the new stunners and mega basses and stuff that break the bank sometimes. That's just something to consider there.
Something I look at when I look at jerkbaits is, I've got rogues in my box that you can pick up most places somewhere around $7-8, maybe $9, maybe with inflation now. But the stunners, you're going to get up into the $15-16 range, and I've got both of them in my box. They both catch fish. They are both very much of a confidence bait for me. But it's one of the things, too, is that each one does its own thing. And it's like you said, you get a little bit of different action, and sometimes that little bit different action makes the difference between making that fish bite, and sometimes they're not going to bite at all.
Yeah. I like the rogue a little bit shallower, dingier water because that to me gives more of a wobble in my head. just a personal experience, but that's it. They all catch fish, and there's a reason they were all created. And if I'm trying to get it untied here from the other mess, and something I always was really excited to try because who's the greatest fisherman we all think about all the time? That's won all this money in tournaments and done all these things is Kevin Van Dam. Whenever he created his own jerk bait, the Strike King model, I'll pull it up here. Just that's just his KVD. This is the KVD 300 series. It has 3 hooks. I've got some here that just have 2 as well. I mean, and it's a completely different look than the Rogue. I can't get my jerk baits are all tied together, but it's a completely different style. You can see if I and I mean completely different. And to me, there's those are 3 distinct different types. This is just a long, slender, pointed minnow. It doesn't, and it's the bills. It allows it to kind of dance. It's, I don't know. Maybe I'm analyzing this too much. This is how my brain works, but they're all different. And what makes them each special is something that I don't know what it actually is to the fish, but there's a reason why certain times of the year, certain ones work better, or certain days, certain times of the day. You're going to have better success on different jerk baits than you would, and you might want to think about reasons on that. Going forward.
Something for me, this has always been a rule of thumb for me. If it's clear outside, I'm typically using something of a more of a natural color, that blue sparkle that gets that flash from the sun. If it's cloudy, dingy, more of those darker colors, that clown colored Rogue, those are the ones I'm going after. And it's, some people may have completely opposite results, but when I'm fishing jerk baits, those are the rules of thumb that I'm typically going with which ones that I've got tied on my rod.
Yeah, I mean I try to make it real simple with mine. Kind of go along with that anymore. Um, if it's clear, I got the Pro Blue Mega Bass, and if it's a little bit dirtier, here's the GP stand reaction. Don't know what GP stands for actually. Ghost Pearl probably. Yeah, Ghost. That would make sense. Um, that's 2 things there. I mean, if it's real bright sunny, I've seen a shiny reflecting one like those Smithwicks tend to have foil up on those. Um, Sometimes they like to have that something flashing. I think too, it makes it pop and just different days and different water depths, and they're all unique. And then you get the little Rapalas, even the X wraps and stuff that they can dart around and uh, have their special days. And like you said, the clown colors and um, even a shot color like a pink and every now and then too. There's all kinds of different reasons why you want to try to throw each one. And I think once you get confidence in one, that's usually your best one because you have more confidence to let it sit there. And I think as we go into cadence, probably here soon with the next topic, if you don't believe in that bait, there's no way you have the faith to let it sit there, jerk, jerk, pause, and let it pause and sit there and do nothing unless you firmly believe that bait can work. And so if you have to have confidence in it before you start to do that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's where we're going with the cadence is because of that pause. Sometimes it's 1 second, 2 seconds. Sometimes it's 10 or 15 seconds, depending on the type of water you're working in, the way the fish are reacting to it. I know this past weekend when I was out fishing, it was a pause of around 5, 6, 7 seconds. And if I pulled it before then, you wasn't getting the bite. But when they bit it, they really got on it good.
Hmm. That's a pretty long pause. I mean, the colder the water, they talk about the longer the pause. And I never forget though watching Kevin Van Dam at the Grand Lake Classic back in 2013, the one Cliff Pace won. I mean, he was going to town out there, just going as hard as he can. And how in the world is he doing that? I don't know, but it's sometimes they can change the rules. I don't think you have to always have a long pause if it's cold, but there's definitely something to be said that the longer you want to let it sit there in the pause and the colder water, the more it's going to help you out. And then I think that the more the pressure they are too, or if it's windy and if it's a prefrontal, you can tell it's a good day. The shorter pause, if it's more post frontal, those fish are lethargic and laying there, and they don't have a huge strike zone around them. They're kind of more of an ambush, reactionary state. If you let it sit there and just truly fall, they can't handle it after a while if it just sitting there staring at them over top of their face. If you're around cover, longer pauses a lot of times too. And if we go into it with a live scope, it's something that you can actually see how they're reacting to it. I watch them a lot of times. This summer I would try, working fish offshore, throwing a jerkbait at them, and you'd be pop, 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 pop. And if you paused it, then they would go away from it. But if you kept it going, then they would come after it and eat it. And it was really, that's unique because it's the opposite of how you go with it about it a lot of times in the wintertime and early spring. You want that pause, and the warmer weather with that jerkbait, you're really wanting to hit it, and you're actually seeing it. And if you guys have scopes and you have live, forward sonar on your boat, you can really kind of dial that in quicker with what you're seeing and what those fish are actually wanting out of your jerkbait.
I know one of the things I've always done as a jerkbait fisherman, and I fish jerkbaits a lot, both hard jerkbaits and soft jerkbaits. But when I'm fishing a hard jerkbait, I start fast, I slow down, but I let the fish determine from it's there. It's a lot easier to slow down for me than it is to try to speed up if I've started slow, because a lot of times if I've started slow, I don't like to fish slow, and I lose a lot of confidence real quickly. But I can always tell myself, okay, if I'm fishing fast, maybe I'm fishing too fast. I need to slow down a little bit, and that allows me to keep that bait in my hand a little bit longer. And I know that's what it was when I fished the other day. It was simply I wasn't getting the bites that I felt like I should have, and then did a little bit of a slowdown. And it was every time on that pause, and right as you went for that next jerk, that's when they were jumping on it.
Yeah. And you kind of, that's really unique. And I think that's a great way, maybe one of the great lessons and things that you could say about jerkbait fishing is, I like that idea of starting slow. That way it's easy. Starting fast and slowing down, because, it is easier. And if they're biting it fast, then why slow down? Keep covering as much water as you can. But, if they're not, then you start to, well, I'm going to let this one soak a little longer. I'm going to let this soak one a little bit longer. And as you let it go, then all of a sudden you start to gain, it's that the fish will clue you in. So that's a good way of putting it. And I think that, starting fast and then letting the fish kind of tell you if you need to slow down as you go. Because if you're not getting bit after a while, you need to change something. That's for sure.
When you talk about the cadence, you hear so many people talk about it's jerk, pause, jerk, pause. And that's, I think, a typical cadence that most people try to fish. But again, you have to play with the cadence. Sometimes one jerk, two jerks, one jerk, three jerks. Mess with the cadence and see what it does. But again, it's kind of like what we've talked about when you're fishing on live scope. You have to watch and see what the fish are doing with how they're reacting. And if you do a three jerk and all of a sudden you're getting bit and you're not paying attention to it, and then your bites go away because you stop doing that three jerks, that's the reason why you're not catching your fish. And you have to listen to what the fish are telling you. And again, jerkbait fishing, some people look at it as like you're just randomly throwing it out there and hoping for the best. It's probably one of the most mentally and physically draining baits that you can throw, especially if you do it all day long.
Draining is for sure. It will wear you out if they're not hitting it. But if they're only getting it, the only thing that you can think they're biting, it can wear you out for sure. And I think, to add to the cadence, instead of it just thinking jerk, jerk, pause, jerk, whatever that cadence is that you're kind of working. I think the aggressiveness of how far, they talk about jerking it on slack line. That's one of those kind of the rules that a lot of those you see on pros talk about is, you want to jerk the bait on slack line to let it pop and let it pop more. And then you also want to think about how hard are you going to jerk it? Are you going to try to make that bait move 12 inches in the water column? Well, if you're this time of year, how often is a bait going to take and jump over a foot to 2 foot in the water column with that big bounce? Do you want to just pop, kind of like I was talking about with the mega bass, so just kind of like just flutter up and back? I'm not saying that's like perfect, but some days that could be perfect. You know what I mean? And is it just gonna be just a subtle, just a twitch on slack line, just letting it sit there? And I've had some days where you sit there and it's gonna be like if you're fishing by this group of little standing timber trees, you just pop, and they'll just load up on it. Or then you're on like a channel swing and they're hitting on it. And you just might want to let it sit in that one spot and barely twitch it like that shad that's just having a hard time. Or some days they're sitting there and you're wanting it to pop, and they get their attention. They'll react up to it, pop, kill it, and it's every day is different. And, you also need to play with how aggressive you're popping it. Right? And that's just something you need to keep an eye on, and how far you're making that bait move with each jerk of your rod. You don't want to overdo it or you don't want to underdo it sometimes. So you got to react and see how that's going to go for your bait.
Well, we've talked about the cadence and the baits. I think one of the most important things that you have to look at when you're going to be serious about jerkbait fishing is your rod and your reel. You have to have the correct setup that allows you to do what you need to do with this. And the most important thing, I think, to start with, you need to spend as much as you can afford on a quality rod that allows you to have the action that you need from that, but also have the backbone to be able to get that good hook set on those long casts that you need to make when you're jerkbait fishing.
Yeah, I mean, and it depends on also. I think your hook matters a lot with that too. I want to add that because you look at the hooks on the bait. You know how really how thick is the wire on that treble hook? Because a lot of times those fish are just slapping at it, and if it's a lighter wire hook, you know, you with that light rod to where you're not pulling that out. And it doesn't take a lot of pressure to ever set hard into it. You're kind of just letting it stay pulled and keeping your pressure and playing with it. I prefer a really light one because those hooks I use a lot of times are very light wire to stay hooked up with it. But you know, that's with the whole rod thing. I think you could go over forever. I think reels, you know, but I'm gonna go in the rods first. Is also you want to look at your height and the length of your rod. Because a lot of times, I mean, I don't. For me, I don't want to be jerking and slapping the water every time. You know what I mean? So I want to make sure I get a rod that's not too long. A 6'8" has been perfect for me. I've got a 6'8" that's been absolutely the perfect jerkbait rod, and I've caught more on it. It's super, got a great tip on it, and it has a lot of action to it, and but then it kind of solids up there at the end where I've caught some good sized fish on it, and I feel confident with that. However, it's not got a lot. You're not going to be boat flipping with it much. You're going to play the fish out, but if sometimes you're going to make a farther cast to that 7'2" or that 7'4", whatever. If you get a really flimsy one to get it out there, you're going to get a farther cast. But are you going to be able to actually work it without slapping? And it's going to be heavier, and it's going to kind of cause more fatigue throughout the day.
That was something I was going to point out too. Was the longer the rod, especially as you talk about your height, and you and I, we have a little bit of a height difference. I think you're around 6 foot. I'm 6'4", and my rods that I go with is I've got my Veritas. This one's a 6'10", and 6'10" on my jerkbait rods. I have two of these, and I love this. This is a fast medium light that I've got on this one, and then I've got it if I'm throwing a little bit heavier jerk bait, if I can keep it from punching the lights out here at the house. I just picked this one up. I got this one for Christmas. This is the new loose custom light, and this one is a medium heavy with a fast tip. And this one right here works better when I've got a little bit of a heavier bait on. Those thicker jerk baits that I was throwing, kind of like the one I was showing you right here. That this one's got the double barrels in it, where the other ones don't. But it's like you said, you don't want to be able to slap the water with your rod tip because, again, especially if you've got a fish that's chasing you toward the boat, you smack that water, you're going to spook that fish. And the more important thing is, too, you want a fast tip so that, like you said, when that fish hits, it loads and you don't jerk the bait away from the fish as you go back in. And, again, it's not a flipping jerk set. It's just basically just loading the rod tip up, letting the rod tip do what it's set for, and let that fish take care of the business on the other end.
Yeah, you don't need to overdo it, like you said. So that's something, and I think those are great choices of rods, like you said. And and your height is what matters. I mean, you are taller than me, and so you can get away with a little bit longer rod. So I mean, it's something that you can use to kind of maximize your casting distance, and things like that can kind of help you with comfort level there. But another thing to think about, and with your reel, personally, I don't think that you need to. I think you need to be throwing a high speed reel with a jerk bait because to me, you're never moving the reel. I mean the bait with your reel. You're only picking up slack, and at the very end, reeling your bait back in. You're also never in reeling your fish in. So, and it's not like you're out there trying to power through a big deep diving crankbait or really need something that you want super heavy drag on. You don't want your drag locked down with a jerk bait, so you can kind of get away with using those 7-1 to faster reels I mean, nothing wrong with a 6-4 to 1 or 6-5 to 1 either. Those are fine, but I think that's about as slow as you want to go. A 6 ratio, ideally probably get up to the sevens or so, in my opinion, with that jerk bait to help you pick up slack and continue to work with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, this one that I've got here, this is one of the loose customs. This one's a 7-5 to 1. My other one is also it's a new one as well. It's the new custom lose. It's a 7-5 to 1. I do have an 8-3 to 1 that I'll use mixture between top water and jerk bait. But again, it's like you said, I'm looking for something that I'm going to be able to pick up a lot of line quickly once I get that fish hooked up. But everything's so important. That jerk has to come on light line or on slack line because that's where you get your action from your bait.
Yeah, for sure. That's a big part of it. And I think you just said you said light line, so I think we could probably go into line selection next. I think that your line needs to be something that you're trying to one, you have to be confident with the clarity of your water too. Obviously you want to go with that lighter line and clear water, but how deep are you wanting that bait to work? And if you're trying to keep that bait up, if you're trying to keep it over a lot of trees and timber, you probably go with a little bit heavier line. But a lot of times with the jerk baiting, in my opinion, if it's clear enough to throw a jerk bait, this is my rule. If it's clear enough to throw a jerk bait, it must be pretty clear water. If I'm trying to catch one jerk bait, it must not be there. So it's pretty clear water. So I'm going to need to maximize getting depth, because if I can catch them up shallow on a spinner bait or a square bill or something like that this time of year, that's what I'm going to do. But if I'm jerk baiting, I'm trying to reach those deeper suspending fish. So I want to maximize my depth. That's why you see a lot of times I had the +1 on the baits, the deeper version of the jerk bait. So I want to go as light a line as I could possibly feel comfortable with, and make sure I'm using a deeper running jerk bait to where I'm maximizing that depth.
I think one of the things I like to do is like you said, is I'm going to use as light as line as I feel comfortable with. And for me on bait casters, that's usually around 10 pound. Most of my jerk baits, top water, I'm looking at 10, 12 pound. That's just, I can make long casts with those. I feel confident with those. Some people may say, well, I want to go down to 8 pound. If you feel confident with 8 pound line, go with it if you need it, especially in those clear lakes. But if you can get away with 12, why use 10? But again, it's the conditions that you're fishing in. If you're fishing in dirty water and you're trying to keep the bait way up high, you can get away with a much heavier line. You could go with a 15, 17 pound and be perfectly fine. And the thing that you got to understand too is this is with any bait that you're working with. The heavier line that you use, the higher you're going to keep that bait up in the water column, because it's not going to allow it to sink with that smaller line.
Yeah, and I think most people, and we talk about, are using fluorocarbon with jerk baits, because one, it's more transparent and things like that. One thing that I do, we talk about, if you want to be kind of bargain guy here with your fishing, is when we go to top water season, you start catching on top. I a lot of times have the same rod. I can use a top water. It kind of like my top water jerk bait rod is kind of the same type of rod for me. And as we get closer to the spawn, or we get closer, I'm throwing something on top water, I'm going with motto on it, to kind of keep that higher, keep my bait from sinking, let the top water work how it should. So, and I've noticed that really changes how my jerk bait will work, of course, because it's going to have a little bit more stretch and a little bit more of a sponginess in the water. And you'll notice it makes your bait, kind of pop differently, and it's kind of pulling the nose up. And like we talked about, if you're trying to do that, you can achieve that with, changing your line type instead of just having to worry about how you're weighting it. Your line type can also affect how your bait's going to sink or suspend in the water or float.
Well, Coach, I think we've hit about every possible topic that we could here on jerk baits, except for actually having in the water stuff. But that's something that will come. I don't think that any of us want to go out and jump in the water right now to try to get some underwater footage of a jerk bait in action. But maybe when it warms up a little bit, maybe we can work that in.
Maybe we'll find something online. We'll just ask to steal some footage this
Well,
time of
we've
year
got to
for
find
that.
somebody that wants to sponsor us, like a bait tank that we've got we can use to do our videos with, and we can design our own baits with stuff that we've got.
Yeah. I mean, it's very true. I think the biggest thing, though, if you're going to get good at jerkbaiting, you got to go do it on your own and figure it out. You're not going to be able to do it just from listening to us. You know what I mean? But at the same time, is if you have a swimming pool or even your bathtub, you can kind of sit there, and that's actually a great way to do it if you think about it too. If you could just fill up your bathtub, and you could fill it up and you could turn it on hot, okay, which I know you probably don't want to waste all your hot water. but you're going to be able to get the water temperature up higher. And you put that jerk bait down in the water, you're going to see that it's probably going to do what? It's going to go up with. This is a glide bait, but anyway, like it's going to
That's
rise
another
up.
show to come.
Yeah, but or you can look at it, and then if you put ice in the water with it, and have it, and you can actually just clear water, it's right there, and you can actually see how that bait's going to react, right there for you, and you can manipulate your temperature. You can do things that's maybe the science guy. I mean, trying to like overanalyze this stuff, but like you can have your own experiment in your bathroom tonight if you wanted to do that and kind of experiment with how that jerk bait's going to react. And you could even get fancy. You know, thermometer. You can know what that jerk bait that you have in your box, because even if you have one Berkeley Stunner, if you have one Smithwick Rogue, it may work a certain way, and you buy the same exact one off a different package, and it just somehow it's slightly different, and it may work completely different. So you got to make sure you know how that bait is going to work in the water. And maybe we're overanalyzing it because we're fish nerds and we love it, but at the same time, think of different ways that you can practice and you can study what your bait's going to do on your own, and you can dive into some cool things.
And Coach, I think all of those are great points. And again, the most important thing on the backside of that, take the bait that you have the confidence in, stick it in your hand, and go fish. And that's the one that you are going to find. No matter one of these baits that we've talked about with all the manufacturers, that one bait that you find, that confidence level is going to catch you more fish than that other one, just because somebody else says this one's better than that one.
For sure. The only thing more important than that is subscribing to the show before you
definitely want
sign
to
off.
subscribe.
So make sure you
very
subscribe.
So let's throw that information up there. Again, there's that's the subscribe button. Be sure to hit that bell. Give us a thumbs up if you like what you see. And, of course, there's all of our information at Casting with the Coaches. He's at Coach eFerg12. I'm at Collier SC Live. And most importantly, that email address. We want to see those pictures. Send us your name, the size of the catch, and the body of water that you've got. We've got a couple that we dropped in this week. Matthew Tomalonis and his dad, Ryan, they went down to Del Hollow on New Year's Eve. Matthew with a stud 4.5-pound smallmouth that he got. But Matthew, he is a heck of a fisherman. He's fishing down on the Murray. It's like the Murray State College team, but he's going to get to fish on the collegiate side this year for BASS as well as some of the MLF stuff. He's a local guy up here, but looking forward to seeing that young man. He's going someplace with fishing.
Well, good luck to him. Go get it, catch them all, man. Coach,
before we go to, I know that you talked about this as your goals in the beginning of the season, but you made it happen. You're officially entered, and I'm not putting anything out there. And I don't think that's secret, but if it is, I'll edit it out. But I got to say congratulations to you because you're making that next step in the world of bass fishing.
Yeah, I'm appreciate that, Jane. I'm really excited. I'm going to fish the kind of, they call it Division 2 now, into the Central Series, but the Central Series of the Bass Opens. Super excited. Been a dream of mine forever to try to do it. And it's a time in my life where I know that I can do it financially, and it's just me, and we can do it. My wife supported me on doing this, and it's great that I get the opportunity to go for it. It may not work out, but I never want to be able to go. I want to make sure I try it, and I want to see if I can, and it'll be a great experience. I've never been out there. So we'll be looking at Lake Ouachita coming up here soon. And I'm going to try to do a pre-practice and get some shots. And I may try to have to, put that on YouTube for everybody to go, follow along and see. And we'll tie it in with this and talk about how it's going to go. We've got Ouachita, Logan Martin, and Eufaula in Oklahoma. So I'm going to have put some miles on the truck, and we're going to take the nitro and we're going to go fish and hopefully get lucky, and we'll see how it goes. But I'm sure to make a lot of new friends, and it'd be a cool experience for sure.
And we're certainly looking forward to following along with you here and chronicling your trials throughout this, and wish you the best of luck as you go through the season, Coach.
Appreciate it, buddy. Thanks, man.
Guys, that's going to do it for us this week. Again, subscribe, like, let us know what you see. If you like something, what you want to see on future episodes, we'll get it in coming up. He's Coach Evan Ferguson. I'm Coach James Collier. This is Casting with the Coaches, presented by Border Sporting Goods. We'll see you next week.
Spring fishing season is just around the corner, and Borders Sporting Goods is your fishing headquarters for rods and reels from G. Loomis, St. Croix, Fenwick, Lewes, Daiwa, Shimano, and Abu Garcia. No matter what species of fish you are targeting, Borders has the perfect setup to make your next trip on the water a success. Borders has baits in every style and size with a wide selection of tackle from Berkeley, Strike King, Zoom, Z-Man, Bandit, and many more. Before hitting the water for your next fishing trip, stop by and stock up at Borders Sporting Goods, US 60 West in Ashland.